Hello and welcome to the Awkward Geek. Today's topic is happiness, and this video is actually going to be split into two parts. When I started to outline it, I realized that I was going to need to talk about happiness, and then I was going to need to talk about self-actualization. So today's vlog will be about happiness, and the next vlog will be about self-actualization, but it's tied into this topic of happiness. And really quickly, I was talking to a friend who does a vlog, and she had wanted to sort of do this idea, and I thought it was really neat, so I just want to do it. There we go. Really quickly, I've just trolled you. Awesome. Alright, so if we want to talk about happiness, we have to talk about the definition before we talk about anything else. And I feel like there's a simple definition and a meaningful definition of happiness. Now, the simple definition is easy. It's to be delighted, pleased, or glad as over a particular thing. And the important thing to focus in on here is the thing that we're happy about. We can be happy about love, we can be happy about family, job, money. Some things are more solid than other things. For instance, family and love, those things are a bit more solid, generally speaking, and we can sort of rely on those to help keep us happy. Things like money, however, are more ephemeral, and they can easily be lost. Interest in them can simply be lost. So, in that sense, that's why we say money can't buy happiness, because even though money can make you happy, it's a much more briefer, fleeting thing. Now, what I want to talk about is a more meaningful definition of happiness, which takes that definition as being glad over a particular thing. It first replaces glad with satisfaction. We're looking at a specific type of happiness that satisfaction is, which is it's not glee, it's not cheerfulness, it's not that adrenaline rush that you get from say playing a game and winning, or when you feel like you're on cloud nine after a great date. That sort of happiness, that's not what satisfaction is. Satisfaction is more contentment, more just generally feeling good, but it's a more low-key sort of thing. And then the thing that we're talking about, the thing that what we're plugging for thing is a life. So what I term this as is an abiding satisfaction with life. I feel like life is the most solid thing that you can be happy with. If you can be happy with life, then you can always be happy, because once life no longer happens for you, you don't care whether or not you're happy. If you're dead, it doesn't matter. But even if you believe in an afterlife, I believe in an afterlife, but even if you believe in an afterlife, you're still living, and to you, death is merely a transition period. So there's no conflicts with that. In that sense, you're still living, so as long as you're living, you can be satisfied, you can be happy. Now, in order to talk about this, I want to talk about something called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And the reason why I want to use Maslow's hierarchy of needs to talk about this is because I feel like it's the best way to describe happiness in the way that I want to, in the way that I discovered it, and in the way that may be able to help you. Now, just a disclaimer here quickly. Maslow's hierarchy of needs is tossed around in psychological circles. You may have learned it in a psych class like I did. But I'm not using it in the psych context here. Because Maslow's hierarchy does not have a lot of empirical data to support it, I don't feel like it would be wise of me to use a psychological basis for describing this. I feel like that abuses what psychology is. So instead, I want to talk about this from a more philosophical standpoint. So I'll just keep that in mind. This is more of a philosophical look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs rather than a concrete, empirical, psychological one. Now, Maslow's hierarchy of needs has different levels of needs, with the bottom needs being necessary and required before you can begin to look at your other needs. And so it has physiological needs, psychological needs, and then self-fulfillment needs. When you meet a need, it leads to a sense of satisfaction. Now, this point is important because a lot of people forget this. They when they think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, they think you meet a need, you move on to the next need, and that's it. So you keep moving on to the next needs, and that's how it works. But that's not how it works. When you meet a need, you're satisfied, and you only become dissatisfied when you realize the next need. And that's important because you're not always going to realize the next need, as we'll explain later. In fact, I'm going to quickly use an example to explain it. And that's to talk about developed nations or wealth versus undeveloped nations versus poverty. It's sort of almost more difficult for people in, say, a developed nation to actually achieve satisfaction simply because of this fact that they realize a lot of these more elusive needs than people in undeveloped nations. And really quickly, just another disclaimer, I'm not saying, woe is me, oh, I've got all of these things, life is horrible. It's not that at all. But what it is when you're in an undeveloped nation, for instance, a lot of the times your focus isn't even on a lot of the psychological needs. So once you've met these needs for the physiological needs for, say, hunger and thirst, and then shelter and stuff like that. Once those are met, you're satisfied. And as long as you never really realize the other needs, then you're never dissatisfied. You're simply satisfied. And that's why a lot of times they'll show clips of people that are poor, and you'll wonder how people, even in our own nation, that are poorer than you are, can be happy and can be satisfied with life. And I think it just comes down to this thing of, when we have more, it's easier for us to be dissatisfied. And it comes back to that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where we focus more on other things. When you have less, there's less for you to focus on. Now, I talked briefly in that example about elusive needs. And the three elusive needs are love, esteem, and self-actualization. And these are the top 3 needs in Maslow's hierarchy. Each of these needs builds a more solid foundation once you achieve it, once you meet it, upon the other needs that came before it, which is an important point. Because, for instance, when you meet your need for hunger and thirst, and then say you meet your need for shelter, if you get shelter but you haven't met your need for hunger or thirst, then you're going to be driven out of your shelter to look for eating food. That shelter need does not satisfy these other needs. But once you get to these psychological needs and the self-fulfillment need, which is really just another psychological need, once you achieve the next need, it actually makes stronger the needs that came before it. So, for instance, if you meet the need for esteem, then if you say lose a loved one, or you lose the support of a loved one, or you get a friendship and it breaks, or you break up in a relationship, if you have that need for esteem, then the impact of losing that love is less important, because your esteem is there to help counterbalance that. Now, of these 3, love is the easiest. It's on the bottom, and it's the easiest to meet because love is a condition. You get love unconditionally from family. It's even the most loner types often have groups of friends that they talk to. So you have friends, you have family, you have all of these ways that you can feel loved. And so it's really the easiest need to meet. Unfortunately, love is not enough. And the reason why it's not enough is because our society sort of focuses us on esteem. So even if we feel loved, suddenly we realize that we need to feel worthwhile. We need to feel good about ourselves, because society puts this on us. So even though we are satisfied with love, we're dissatisfied with not feeling worthwhile. And I feel like this is probably one of the biggest issues, one of the biggest reasons that people aren't happy in developed nations around the world today. It's more because they don't feel worthwhile than anything else. Now, when we talk about esteem, it's important to realize that it's possible to have sort of a false sense of esteem, an esteem that is built purely upon the love of others and their support. They give us support, they build us up, but if we rely on that support and that building us up in order to meet those needs, then if we lose that love and support, if we lose those loved ones, then suddenly we fall back. And not only do we not have our sense of esteem, but we never actually had it. So when we lose that sense of love, we fall back further. We don't have that sense of esteem to rely on when we lose the loved one, because we never really had that sense of esteem in the first place. But support from others is important in building our esteem. When we're initially trying to build it up, their support, their encouragement, that's what we need in order to begin to believe those things and to internalize them and to actually build a real, true sense of self-esteem. So I don't want to discount that. You do want to rely on others for that, but you need to disassociate their compliments from themselves and from their love, and actually apply it to yourself and say, I am this, I feel this, I feel worthwhile, those sorts of things. Esteem is really sort of almost like a ceiling of happiness for most people. Once people feel worthwhile, they often don't even realize that they need self-actualization. And that's why I talked about earlier that if you don't realize a need, then you can be happy, you can be satisfied. But the reason why this is a good thing and it's a bad thing. But the reason why I wanted to talk about it being a bad thing is because it's possible, say, for you to lose your esteem. You can suddenly fail at something in life, something big, and question how worthwhile you are. You can question your esteem. Your esteem can be lost. And it's not that common, but it is possible, and it does happen. But even more common than that is the spontaneous realization of the need of self-actualization. So I think the best way to describe this is to look at something known as like a midlife crisis or a quarter life crisis. And this happens a lot to people, apparently. And what I think comes down to is you feel worthwhile, everything is going good in life, and then suddenly you have this need, this realization that you don't know who you are. And that's why you suddenly see them doing all these things that are uncharacteristic of themselves, because they're exploring all these different things. They're trying to figure out who they are. They're trying to figure out what makes them happy and all those sorts of things. And so that's what a midlife or a quarter life crisis actually is like the spontaneous realization that you need to be self-actualized, and they don't have that. And because this can happen, we can't just rely on esteem to be our basis for happiness. We want a happiness which is lifelong, and the best way to achieve that is to have the most solid, the strongest thing supporting us in our satisfaction. If we reach the top of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, as far as we know, there's nothing else out there that we could possibly realize that would challenge it. We could possibly lose that self-actualization, but that's a very rare thing. Unfortunately, I'm sort of running out of time, so I'm not going to continue on with that here. I'm going to talk about self-actualization in the next vlog, and talk about both why self-actualization is the strongest form of achieving satisfaction, and how you can sort of achieve self-actualization, because that's a whole topic in and of itself. But I feel like that self-actualization is the key to happiness. So to wrap up today's video, we all want happiness. We want a lifelong satisfaction. We want that. And the key to that is self-actualization. So hopefully you can tune into my next vlog about self-actualization, where I will talk about that. That's it for today. That's it for this vlog, and I thank you for watching. Feel free to post comments below, send me messages. Let me know. Do you agree? Do you disagree? I'm curious. So thanks for watching. Have fun.